We love Pattaya.
Love Pattaya.
We love it, we love it. Pattaya. We love Pattaya.
Love Pattaya.
We love it, we love it. Pattaya. We love Pattaya. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Not too bad.
Matthew Kelly is my special guest here, and he was right at the forefront of that kind of late 60s, early 70s blues phenomenon that came out of America. Tell us some of the people that you actually played with.
Well, T-Bone Walker is the one that I had the greatest reverence for, because when I went on tour opening for B.B. King, and B.B. King said, "Look, I'm not the king of blues. The real king was T-Bone Walker." The problem with T-Bone was the big push with blues would start with the big promoters. That came later, and T-Bone passed away before that, so he didn't get as big as B.B. King,
Right.
but he would have had he lived.
Yeah. And that was in San Francisco, right?
It was in the San Francisco Bay Area, down around Santa Cruz, all the way up to San Francisco. Yeah.
And there was a massive scene there, wasn't there?
There was indeed, and the blues was not a big part of the San Francisco scene as much as all the other stuff. The Jefferson Airplane, Moby Grateful Dead, all those kind of bands.
The kind of psychedelic rock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what got you into blues in the first place?
Well, for some reason I was really drawn to it from the time I was young. I started listening to an all-black radio station called KDIA, and they played stuff like Bobby Blue Bland and all this great stuff. And I got to play with a lot of the people I was listening to when I was young, which was like such an honor to be able to play with these guys.
I was going to say, it must have been a great thrill to be in amongst all these people.
Well, it would be the same as if you'd been invited to play with the Beatles, because that's what they were to me. They were the people I idolized more than the rock people.
Yeah. And what actually got you started? What was the band, or who gave you the big leg up?
Well, this is ironic too. I started listening to Jimmy Reed and Brownie McGhee and Sonny Terry, and later on I had the great opportunity to play with Brownie McGhee, because Sonny Terry is a harp player and they just do a duet.
Yeah.
And so I got to record with Brownie McGhee, which is something I'm working on here to get finished.
And did you get spotted by somebody? Did somebody see you?
Well, how it all happened, actually, that's an interesting story. I went into a club, an after-hours club in East Palo Alto, which was the area that is very dangerous for white people to go there. And anyway, I went in there, and it was an all-black after-hours club, and they were doing a slow blues, and I figured out what key they're in, and I, uninvited, jumped up on stage and started playing. You just don't do such a thing. And I was really kind of a shy person, but I did that. And Mel Brown, who was the guitar player for Bobby Blue Bland, who was, I think, one of the greatest blues singers of all time, said, "Hey, listen, I'm driving down to Watts to do an album, and I want you to come with me." So we jumped in 2 days later, we jumped in his Cadillac, drove down to Watts, and I lived with him for a month.
When you jumped up on stage there, I mean, that was the big pivotal moment, really.
Absolutely.
Wasn't it?
I was so terrified, but I did it anyway.
but what was it that urged you to do it? Because you said you were a shy person.
Well,
but did you think, I've got to grab this opportunity?
I've never been much into alcohol. So I had a couple glasses of wine, and I don't know, something came over me, and I just did it, and it changed my life. Because it was through Mel that I met T-Bone and Shuggy Otis and all those other blues guys. That was the connection to the whole Chitlin thing that I ended up doing.
But then you started your own band, Kingfish, which became very well known in the States.
Yeah, we were quite big. For a period of about 3 years, the Grateful Dead had taken a hiatus, and Bobby Weir came to join us. We were a quartet before that. and our keyboard player had an unfortunate accident, so could never replace him. And then Weir came and joined the band, and so we were the Rolling Stones. That we were the biggest band in America without a record deal. So we were drawing really big audiences and didn't have a record out at that point.
Yeah, so I mean, the blues rock scene really came to fruition in the 70s, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And in Kingfish, that's what we had a prodigy guitar player, a guy named Robbie Hodnott, and he was amazing. And my partner David Torbert, he was amazing. So we just had this chemistry in the sound, and then when Weir joined, that added a whole nother dimension. So we were really getting amazing audience response.
Now, harp playing, I mean, you obviously you've got to work in with the instruments, but do you work around the vocals as well? What's going through your mind as you're playing?
Well, I try not to step on the vocals, and a lot of harp players sometimes overplay, and I try, if anything, I sometimes I underplay, or I do like what we just did in there. I try to do rhythmic things and get in with the rhythm section, because that can add a really nice effect, especially if you've got the right tone.
I mean, the reason we're looking sweaty is because we've just been recording in my studio.
That's
together.
right.
And it's always great working with great musicians, and it's fun to hear how somebody else interprets something.
No, absolutely. And I feel so honored because I've had the privilege of playing with people I've idolized, like the Neville brothers. They had, and all these different great bands that had that groove, and it's a whole bunch of them. So too many to mention, and so yeah, it's been good.
So what happened to Kingfish? Because I mean, you were really big for quite a while, weren't you?
Quite a while. Bobby Weir went back to the Grateful Dead. David Torbert and we signed a record deal with ELO, and we toured opening for ELO.
Wow.
All over America. And then we went on to Great Britain and toured with Ritchie Blackmore, not Deep Purple, but Rainbow.
Rainbow, yeah.
And that was a long, grueling tour.
Really?
About 5 months, every major city in England, Scotland.
And when you were on that tour, did you realise how lucky you were to be doing something like that? Was it
It was
afterwards when you look back on it and you think, wow?
At the time, I was so. It all seemed kind of. I was just trying to. It was hard to take it all in.
Yeah.
And we even did a show with U2, and they opened for us. They weren't. They were just getting started. So, but yeah, I have no idea what we sounded like in those days, because the band went. We had a major change in personnel, and we had some other great players, but it wasn't the same sound. We sounded more like a little bit more like a southern rock band when we toured with ELO.
Right. Yeah, because there was an element of country to what you did.
Yeah.
It was a kind of mixture, wasn't it, of different styles?
Yeah, well, Torbert and I both played with the New Riders of the Purple Sage, which was country. It was basically Torbert and a guy named David Nelson, and Jerry Garcia was in that band for a little while, and then they hired a real professional steel player from Nashville.
Yeah.
So.
I remember the story that Jerry Garcia gave you a guitar, which you had here in Pattaya.
Yeah.
So I had to go on it quite a while ago.
Yeah. It was what they call an Olympic guitar, and all of Jerry's the guitars he played towards the end of his career were all made by this guitar maker in San Francisco, and
they were very special.
Amazing instruments.
Amazingly
that
made.
particular one I had was not the best of the guitars, but the other ones were outstanding.
Yeah. Okay, so after Kingfish, what happened to you then? What direction did you go in?
Well, let's see. It's hard to, because during all this, and before and interspersed in all this, I went out and played what they call the Chitlin circuit. I went to the Midwest and the South, and ended up in New Orleans, and played in all kinds of in all black nightclubs. There was no white people whatsoever. And
how did they take to you?
Well, they were great. The black audiences were great. I had the problem with white.
I guess so long as they see you've got the chops, then.
Oh, they treated me like a king. I was the problem I had was, especially in the South, was with the whites. You know, I don't know if I heard the story, but the Ku Klux Klan is down there, and they're still active in this period. And I had, you know, I was threatened with
Really?
a pistol put in my mouth,
Wow.
saying, you know, in this part of the country, you don't, white kids don't play with blacks, and it was really, you know, intimidating. And
It was a crazy time, wasn't it?
yeah, and it's still going on. It's not to the level it was then, because this was back in early '70s,
Yeah.
and especially down in, you know, Texas, Louisiana, and all
But
that.
you say that even today there's still an undercurrent.
Yeah, sure, you can.
Yeah. Oh, I bet you must have been thinking, why did I get myself into this music scene? You know?
Well, yeah, eventually, I was playing with this incredible B3 player, this black guy named Johnny Carswell, from.
That's like a Hammond organ.
Yeah, and that's what you met Chuck and Patty, and Patty was in that
yeah.
band for a while, and then Patty dropped off, and so I went out and with him, and played all these places in Indiana and Kentucky, coal mining towns and stuff. But finally, we had to go our separate ways because it was getting so dicey with the threats and stuff. And then I ended up in New Orleans, and it was the same kind of thing.